Hello, if you're clicking on this video, it means you're probably in a rush and you need to remember some quick facts about your camera settings, so I have got you. If you're a beginner photographer, it can be really overwhelming to jump into a shoot and remember everything that you need to about your camera. So I'm gonna walk you through very quickly your aperture/f-stop, your shutter speed, your temperature, and your ISO. Stick around. Your aperture or f-stop, which will usually show up on your camera as f/number, impacts your depth of field and how much light comes into the camera. The smaller that number, the smaller the depth of field and the more light will enter your camera. If you're shooting with a 35mm lens, for example, I have a Sigma 35mm lens, my f-stop or aperture goes all the way down to f/1.4 and it goes all the way up to f/16. When I'm photographing humans, I try and keep my f-stop or my aperture as small as possible while still making sure everyone is in focus. Some numbers I like to aim for: if I have one person in the photo, I keep my f/number between 1.4 and around 2.4. If I have two people in the photo, I will keep my f-stop between 1.4 and 3.4. And if I have more than that in the photo, I will usually bring it down to 4.0 or 5.0, depending on how many people are in the photo. I highly recommend, if you have the ability to look at your image on the back of your camera, click that button. Mine looks like this. As you can see, it has a little camera and then the box cut out. And when I click that, it takes me either to my information page and lets me look through the viewfinder, or it turns this back screen into the viewfinder, and that lets me change the f-stop and see exactly how it's impacting the photo and the exposure. When I bring it super high, it's super exposed. The bigger the f-stop number, the less light comes in. As you can see, this is down at 16. So then if we scroll it all the way back up to 1.4, I am overexposed and there's too much light coming into the camera. So if I were gonna leave all my settings right here, I maybe bring it all the way down here. That's f-stop. The next thing that's going to impact your photo is your shutter speed. Your shutter speed controls how fast the shutter clicks. This is shown again on your camera when you go to the information setting, and again, you can toggle between the viewfinder and the informations by pressing the button with the camera next to it and the screen cut out. So your shutter speed is shown in fractions of a second. Right now, mine is 1/60. That means each time I click the shutter to take a picture, the shutter will be open for 1/60th of a second. This again impacts how much light comes into the camera while taking the photo. Again, I will bring you to this screen. There is a scroll on top of my camera, and as I move that down, this is all the way down at 1/4000th of a second, which is very fast. My shutter is only open for just the tiniest amount of time, allowing the least amount of light possible to enter the camera. You want to adjust this, again, looking into your screen. Adjust the f-stop so your person is in focus, and then adjust the shutter speed to expose them properly. So as you can see here, bringing it down and I'm dark, and bringing it up and I'm lighter. Those are your two most important things to consider while you're doing a portrait shoot. Just a quick note, I did forget to mention that the shutter speed will impact the blurriness of a photo, meaning if it's left open for too long or if the shutter speed number is too low, you will run into blurry photos or unwanted movement. I recommend not going any lower than 1/60 or 1/60th of a second while taking portraits, and I usually try and aim for at least 1/200 or 1/200th of a second for really crisp, clear photos. Essentially, I would go for anything between 1/200 to 1/4000, depending on the lighting. But I will go over two other things that will have an impact on your camera. Your ISO also impacts how much light comes into your camera. It also affects how grainy your photo is. I always recommend keeping the ISO as low as possible. The lowest ISO that you can have is 100. And depending on your camera, you can go all the way up to 20 or 30,000 ISO. Don't know what it stands for, unfortunately, and frankly, it doesn't matter when it comes to taking your photos as long as you know how it works. If you're shooting in a well-lit location outside where the sun is fully up over the horizon, you can usually get away with having your ISO at 100. If you are photographing potentially blue hour or in a shady spot or in a place where your f-stop and your shutter speed aren't quite giving you the exposure that you want, bringing up your ISO can help brighten the image while keeping the depth of field that you're interested in having. If you're worried about messing with this yourself, you can always keep it on auto, but I would highly recommend learning how to use ISO to your advantage to increase your knowledge, your skill level, and be able to master your camera so you know how to use it in any lighting situation. The very last piece of information I'll leave you with is the temperature. If you're familiar, one option that you have is to adjust the temperature post-production in Lightroom while you're editing. This essentially makes your photo more yellow or more blue. I like to keep this as true to the photo as possible. You can change the temperature on your camera as you're taking photos, and I highly recommend you learn how to master this element of your camera to get better photos straight out of your camera and do less work in Lightroom. While editing in Lightroom, you'll see temperature, but inside of your camera, the temperature change is called white balance. To change my white balance, I have a button on top that says WB, and when I click it, I'm offered a menu. I can scroll through to select what setting I'm at. Most cameras start off on auto, where the camera does the work for you to detect what type of lighting you're in and what temperature it is. But there's options for shade, cloudy, daylight, tungsten lighting, white fluorescence, flash, custom, and then this little thing called Kelvin. Kelvin has scientific meaning, but for us as photographers who are trying to go fast, it is where we can manually adjust the temperature of our photo and how much yellow or blue we get in our image right out of the camera. So again, I'm gonna click on the WB button, and here on Kelvin, I can scroll through, and when I go all the way down, I am completely blue. But as I bring it all the way up, my color starts to change. At the very top, I am mostly yellowy orange. My rule of thumb is to keep my images between 6,000 and 8,000 degrees Kelvin. Again, use your screen as the viewfinder to adjust these settings. You don't want to try and adjust them without seeing how they're going to turn out on the camera. Especially as you're getting started, it can be difficult to look at a situation, look at a lighting situation, an environment, and know how your camera is going to pick it up. As you practice these skills, it gets easier to jump to the settings that you feel will be most appropriate for the environment. However, as you're learning how to use your f-stop, your ISO, your degrees Kelvin, and your shutter speed all together as a unit to create better photos, using the screen as a viewfinder is the best way to see exactly what you're gonna get when you take the photo. When I'm photographing people outside, I tend to keep my settings somewhere around f-stop 2.4, ISO 100, shutter speed 1 out of 2,000, and temperature, again, 6 to 8,000 degrees Kelvin. If you're about to head out to your shoot, I highly recommend starting your camera on these settings and adjusting as you see fit. Another thing I want to mention is don't be afraid to change your camera settings in the middle of your shoot. This is gonna sound silly to admit, but I was afraid of changing the settings on my camera while I was at a photo shoot. And so I would just grin and bear it. I would never ever use the screen as a viewfinder, and I would just cross my fingers, click some buttons, and hope that my picture turned out. It usually didn't, obviously. Or I would keep my camera on the auto settings and just hope for the best. And while that would usually expose my photo properly, I lost out on the chance to be artistic and create a style of my own, especially while shooting couples and individuals' portraits. They were coming out very boring and very flat, which was a huge disappointment when I uploaded my pictures into Lightroom because it looked like I had taken a photo on an iPhone. No shade to iPhone photos, obviously, but that's not what you want when you are looking to become a professional photographer. The manual setting is a great tool to master, and I highly recommend going out and doing some practice photo shoots with friends or family, or anyone that you can get in front of the camera. The more you adjust your manual settings on your camera, the easier it's going to be to do that in the middle of a photo shoot, and the more you're going to understand how your manual settings impact the photo that you get straight out of your camera. If you're confused about anything, leave a comment down below, or if you have a suggestion for a video, or you want me to go more in depth with any of these terms, again, just leave a comment down below. I would be more than happy to break these down individually into separate videos so you can understand them a little bit more. But I wanted to give you a resource to check back on when you're headed out to a photo shoot in case you're feeling a little bit nervous, and I would be more than happy to answer any additional questions in the comments section. I will leave it there for today. Best of luck, you've got it. Be confident and don't be afraid to look at your camera settings. I'm so excited for you. Make something beautiful, and if you are inspired by this, tag me. I want to see what you guys are creating. For now, I will leave it there. Bye.
We stand on the opposite shore. Hello, moon. I reach through mysterious